see. Mr. Tisdale, come in, please. Mr. Tisdale's present, all counsel present, jury's not. Ms. Miranda, you ready to have the jury come in? Yes, state ready to have them come in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, bring them in, please. Okay, thank you all for bearing with us. We appreciate your patience. We're going to push that up till about lunchtime, then we'll take our lunch break. If y'all will give Miss Miranda your attention, please. Miranda. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ginger Miranda, and as you know, I'm part of Eriese Tisdale's defense team. And some of you may have been wondering what my role is, as I've been sitting here with all of you during the guilt phase of the trial. Well, along with Ms. Celedonio, who you met in jury selection, I had the honor of presenting to you in the penalty phase. But first, Eriese Tisdale and the defense team and I want to start off by thanking you for your time and effort in the guilt phase. We respect that you rendered a fair verdict as you promised you would. And now, we ask that you give Eriese Tisdale a fair sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. We ask that you bring to bear your best judgment, realizing that human life is at stake in order to reach a wise and legal decision. I'm going to be talking to you briefly about the process and the evidence to be presented in the penalty phase, and I will be taking you through a roadmap of the evidence. Judge, may I?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little nervous. I want to start by just addressing what the judge is going to be reading to you as the law as it relates to victim impact evidence. You've heard the evidence about the impacts of this homicide on the family, friends, and community of Gary Morales, and this evidence was presented to show the victim's uniqueness as an individual and the resulting loss by Gary Morales' death. However, you may not consider this evidence as an aggravating circumstance. Your recommendation to the court must be based on the aggravating circumstances and the mitigating circumstances upon which you'll be instructed. So many times in our life we say, well, it's not really a matter of life or death, but we can't say that about this. This is the question of life or death, and what I'm going to be talking to you folks about is life. It's about the life of Eriese Tisdale, both before February of 2013 to his ultimate death, because we're all going to die. It's just a question of how we're going to die. This isn't going to be a pity party, and we're not going to feel sorry for him for this or feel sorry for him for that. But it is going to be a reasoned inquiry as to how do we get to the tragic outcome that you folks have had to see for the last couple of weeks, had to suffer through and had to stomach. This is awful stuff. How does this happen? The first couple of weeks was about the what. What happened? Today, we're going to look into the why. Why? Why did these things happen? We're not going to be able to solve any problems, but we're going to be able to take a little look into this thing and look at this tragic outcome. All we can really do is look back and see, how did Eriese get here? How did he get here to sit in that chair, convicted of first-degree murder? So what we're going to do is we're going to look and see where he came from, what his family looks like, what sort of road was he on before he got on that bad road, because we know that he was. And he ended up in a very bad situation that day in February of 2013, where very bad things happened. And you already have decided that he was the person who used the gun that resulted in the death of Gary Morales, and we accept that. It's established that he's been convicted of these crimes, and that's all we need to know up to this point. But we're going to find out more. We're going to find out that Eriese Tisdale grew up in West Palm Beach. And you're going to hear from different people that were in his life. You're going to hear that he was born to a single mother, Charmaine, in New Jersey. But when he was a year old, he moved to Florida. That small family moved to be near their extended family in West Palm Beach. And you're going to meet the matriarchs of the family, Loretta Jenkins and Vanessa Tyree, who are Charmaine's sisters. You're also going to get to meet a neighbor, Mary Ann Brown, who met Eriese and Charmaine when they moved their tiny family to Jupiter, to the Limestone Creek community. You're also going to meet Holly Beer, who is Erice's middle school teacher at Jupiter Middle. And you're going to hear from David Reedy, who is Erice's boss. And he's going to tell you how the contract ran out that he had, and he had to let Eriese go, but he would have loved to have kept him. You're also going to hear from Alice Hudson, who is also an employer of Erice's, who knew him actually from when he was a young boy, when he would come with his mother to help her clean offices at night as her second job. You're also going to hear from some experts. You're going to hear from Dr. Mark Cunningham, who studies prison adjustment. And you're going to hear from Dr. James Garbarino, who's an expert in developmental psychology. And finally, you're going to hear from Ron McAndrew, who's an ex-warden and an expert in the prison systems in Florida. You're going to find that there are aggravating circumstances in this case. But we ask you to listen closely to the mitigating circumstances as well. As you know from our jury selection and from all of our conversations about how the penalty phase works, should you find that sufficient aggravating circumstances do exist to justify recommending the imposition of the death penalty, you then have to look at to determine whether the mitigating circumstances outweigh those aggravating circumstances that you found to exist. The judge is going to read you the law, and he's going to tell you that the mitigating circumstances are not limited to the facts surrounding the crime, that it can be anything in the life of the defendant which might indicate that the death penalty is not appropriate for this defendant. In other words, mitigating circumstance may include any aspect of Eriese Tisdale's character, his background, his life, or any circumstances of the offense that reasonably may indicate that the death penalty is not an appropriate sentence in this case. You will have to give the evidence the weight that you determine. Individually, each one of you get to make that decision. Mitigation is the fact that you will hear about it. Eriese was 25 years old at the time this happened. That he was trying to find his way in the world. He'd come up from a broken home, a single mom, that he was trying to figure out his way in the world. He didn't have any economic advantage. That he had a community around him that was full of drug dealers and violence and full of drugs. And that he took the wrong path, but in the end, we'll come back in front of you, and we'll then state back in front of you, and we'll then state the case and look at the facts of the incidents a little bit more carefully. Because you know the bad thing here is a police officer was killed. And that's got us all mad. When we stand up back at the end of this case and we go through the facts of this case a little more closely, we're going to discuss it and we're going to think about all that Eriese is. The bad thing he was on February of 2013 and all the good things that he's been otherwise. We'll ask you to impose a sentence of life. Because that's what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here to talk to you about life. And today, I'm pleading for a life. I'm pleading for Eriese Tisdale's life. I'm pleading for understanding, charity, kindness, and the infinite mercy that considers all. I'm pleading that we overcome cruelty with kindness and hatred with love. Thank you.
Thank you. If y'all will call your first witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor, we would call Dr. James Garbarino.
Sir, thanks for bearing with us. If you'll come right up here, one of these nice ladies will place you under oath. We'll push that till about 12, and then we'll take our lunch break.
Do you swear or affirm that evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Just watch stepping in, sir.
Judge, may I actually go over there?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name for the record and spell your last name?
James Garbarino, G-A-R-B-A-R-I-N-O.
And please tell us where you work.
I work at Loyola University, Chicago, which is a Jesuit Catholic university in Chicago.
And how long have you worked there?
I've been there for 10 years.
And what do you teach?
I teach child and adolescent development and as a professor of psychology.
What is your educational background?
I received my bachelor's degree in 1968 from St. Lawrence University and a master's degree in education from Cornell University in 1970 and my PhD in human development from Cornell in 1973.
And what are your degrees in?
Well, my undergraduate bachelor's degree is in history and government, the master's degree in education, the PhD in human development and family studies.
And are you part of any professional organizations or societies?
I'm a member of the American Psychological Association and an elected fellow in that organization. I've been the president of one of the divisions of the American Psychological Association, and I'm a member of 2 divisions, including Division 7, which is developmental psychology.
And how many cases have you testified in as an expert?
I've testified in more than 50 cases as an expert.
And have you conducted research in your field?
I've conducted research on child and adolescent development for 40 years, dealing with issues like violence, trauma, child abuse, children in war zones, a wide range of topics having to do with development.
And let's talk first about racial issues. Have you done any research into race and how it affects development?
I've certainly reviewed research on that topic and testified previously about its role in child and adolescent development.
Now, were you able to gather some biographical information regarding Eriese Tisdale's developmental years?
Yes.
And based on that information that you gathered about his younger years, did you come up with an opinion in this case?
Well, I started from the body of research on the impact of racism in American life historically and in the present time.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the numerous findings of people experiencing discrimination, people disproportionately experiencing deprivation and poverty.
Well, doctor, some people may say that racism is all in someone's mind. What would you say to that?
Well, it's certainly experienced by an individual, but the evidence on high school graduation rates and decades of research on differences in treatment, for example, research showing that when police officers and civilians are shown pictures of black boys versus white boys, when asked how old they think they are, they on average think they're almost 5 years older than they are. There are studies showing that when juries hear information, even in the penalty phase, that the same information for a white defendant that they would see as mitigating, they often tend to interpret as aggravating when it's for a black defendant. The numerous studies about encounters with the police, for example, a study in New York found that 82% of black respondents said they didn't think police treated black and white fairly, and only about 50% of white respondents said that. So in many ways there is a large body of evidence about disproportionate outcomes, different treatment.
Is that study saying that the 82% of black people felt that police treated black people differently than white people?
Yes, and that certainly is very consistent with what many, not most black people will talk about in terms of their individual experience.
Now, you said that same study found that white people did not, in that same number, think the same thing.
That's right.
So in that study, would you say that the white people felt that blacks and whites were treated equally by police?
Yes, about half did.
Now, you also talked about how people are treated differently in cases that you know of, disparate treatment by the police.
Well, I think, to give some concrete examples, I was chairing a panel of teenagers a number of years ago, and somebody asked the panel of teenagers, talk about your experience with the police. And this 17-year-old African-American boy stood up and said, well, first you have to know that I'm the president of the Honor Society in my high school. I've been accepted to Ivy League University next year. He says, but nonetheless, since I turned 15, I have been stopped and searched on the street by the police. And then he said, sort of very pointed and humorous way, he said, I don't think it's because I'm president of the Honor Society. And then he went on to say, what his words were, you're lucky I'm a nice person, which I take to mean that with all these advantages and being a very good person, having no criminal history at all, he was willing to accept that, but that was very clear.
Road trial.
Again, have you heard of any other personal anecdotes of this thing that you're discussing with us about the research showing disparity of treatment? Have you personally known of any other personal anecdotes?
Yes, in addition to the kind of research I was citing, for example, the finding that when blacks are apprehended, they're, according to the FBI, 4 times more likely to be shot by the police than whites separately for whether they're guilty or something or not. I'm talking with the mayor of a city in Ohio, African-American mayor, who said that even though he was the mayor of the city, he had to have the talk with his sons that black parents typically do. He said, I told my sons, if you're stopped by one of my police officers, you put your hands on the top of the wheel, you be totally respectful, because if you make one false step, I can't guarantee your safety. I've had men come up to me after doing a talk, and one man came up and said, I'm an African-American man who said...
I'll sustain the objection as long as he frames it in the form of the research that he...
Yes. What other research can you point us to as far as this area of how this influences developmental factors?
Well, there's I'd say, a general recognition that the impact of racism historically and contemporaneously has an effect on development. There's those who think there should be a separate category for, the impact of racism as a mental health issue.
Now, are you saying these experiences that you've just talked about, are you saying these are considered to be the general experience of black people?
The fear is certainly the general experience, and since videotaping has become more and more available, I think the general community has become aware of things in the interactions of black young men and police that previously were known to the black population, but now through videotape being available, more and more the general population is becoming aware of them.
Now, I'm just going to ask you, how do you think it affects the fact that you're a white man, and yet you're testifying to this jury about issues about racism? How would you coincide that?
Well, I spent a lot of years talking with black men particularly, and looking at this research and interviewing them individually, and I think I've conveyed an openness to hear experiences that they might otherwise be reticent to express to a white person. So I think I've invested in forming that connection to hear that. And I have black friends who tell me similar stories, black college professors who've been stopped and harassed and insulted and humiliated.
I'll sustain the objection, but I don't want him to talk about his personal.
Doctor, would you compare that to, let's say, a male gynecologist who treats female patients?
Well, I think it's parallel in the sense that many male gynecologists, it never occurred to them that there was a problem, but women, in my experience, are aware of this, have talked about this, often prefer a female gynecologist for precisely that reason.
Let me ask you, have you had an opportunity to meet Eriese Tisdale?
Yes.
Okay. And looking at developmental factors, would you say that racism is something that played into the developmental factors of Eriese Tisdale?
Yes.
Let me stop you there, Ms. Miranda's right at 12, so we'll go ahead and take our lunch break. Folks, I appreciate y'all's patience and attention. We'll go ahead and take our lunch break. If I can have y'all come back at 1:15 down in the jury assembly room. I have one of the officers come get y'all. Please don't discuss the case with anyone. Allow anyone to discuss in your presence or fixing opinions, okay? Thank you all very much. You can leave your notepads there. All right, the jury's been excused. Thank you all. If y'all will come back at 1:15 p.m., please. I don't want anybody approaching this jury, please. All right, thank you. 1:15.
It's on the door, Yvonne. Yvonne, it's on the door.
No, I'm getting it out of here.